Welcome everyone to Hellon's Momentum Talk. My name is Lotta Julkunen. I'm the design director of Hellon Helsinki, and I'll be acting as your host today. Before we jump into today's topic, I'd like to introduce Hellon to all of you. Hellon is a team of over 100 experts with offices in London, Helsinki, and Oulu. And since 2009, we've conducted over 1,000 successful projects in over 20 countries globally. Hellon is the only company in the world to win 5 prestigious SDN Global Service Design Awards and is also a 3-time Fast Company Innovation by Design Award winner from 2023. We focus on helping our clients succeed through a customer value-oriented approach and innovation model. Our capabilities range from advanced research and strategy to designing and building innovative solutions. We focus on working with global industry leaders worldwide, and one of our assets is this deep understanding across multiple industries. The successful analogies of creating and delivering exceptional value to end customers. Hellon's mission is to help advise and anticipate what happens next to enable new horizons, which is a great segue to today's topic. It's my great pleasure to introduce to all of you our speaker and my dear colleague, Johanna Lamberg, who will be talking about strategic foresight today. Johanna is a senior designer and futurist here at Hellon, and she has helped multiple organizations in building their future resilience and capabilities. Great. Now welcome, Johanna.
Thank you, Lotta. So we'll be talking about strategic foresight and futures thinking in organizations today. I found this really interesting quote from Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, publication from this year that I think puts it perfectly of how we need to operate in a complex and a new kind of world today. So the world has changed in a way that everything is basically interwoven systemically and everything is connected. And we have come to a point where we can no longer look at big global shifts in global market, in technology, or in climate change in silos and separately. We need to address those in a big transformation that requires action from all fronts. And everything that we have lived through in the last decades have led us to a world where everything is really complex. We have complex operating environments. We have emerging, surprising disruptions and shocks that we cannot anticipate. And these kinds of shocks have done to some companies that they even feel paralyzed. It requires a new kind of capability from these organizations to act in an agile and a sustainable manner to avoid that kind of paralysis or stagnation and even extinction in the future if that complexity cannot be navigated. So today our topic will be exactly that. So how to prepare for these kind of disruptions that we know that will occur, but we don't know for sure when they will happen. How do we ensure that we keep moving in this kind of an environment and stay relevant and competitive in our own industries? First, let's go through what we mean by strategic foresight or futurist thinking. So first of all, we know that we people, we're not really good at talking or thinking about futures. And that's why it's no surprise that we have companies that feel really uneasy in this kind of complex and vigilant and really or like volatile environment. And that's no surprise, and it's understandable as we know that our own history and our world has been built in a way which looks for short-term impact. It looks for continuous efficiency. We plan our days by the minute. So understandably, it can feel strange or difficult to think about long-term or longer horizons. Also, for us humans, we tend to stay in our comfort zones. We like to think about things from our own context and without naturally going into those blind spots or horizons that we haven't explored yet. And that's also connected to the fact that our futures are really guided by our own values, our own perspectives, and our own ideologies. We all can say that we have our own desirable futures that may not be in consensus of those futures that other may be looking for or desiring. So a framework that you can see here is the Futures Cone by Joseph Forrest, and I think it's a nice way to illustrate the multiple futures that we have and we can imagine. So we know that there are those projected futures that are those business as usual developments. We have then the preferable or the desirable futures that we would like to happen, like I mentioned just now. Then we have those probable, plausible, possible futures, and of course the preposterous futures that we don't think that would ever happen, but we cannot rule them out, and we need to look at those possibilities as well. So strategic foresight involves exploring, anticipating different kind of alternative futures to inform decision-making in the organizations, to test strategies, to test different kinds of goals the companies have. And it's not about predicting the future. That's really important to remember. It's about enhancing the organizational capability to think longer term and be more prepared for new kinds of shifts and shocks that will happen in the future. So basically, strategic foresight or futures thinking, it's basically about challenging existing assumptions. It's about thinking critically, thinking creatively, and being using our imagination to ensure that in the organizational setting, we align our strategies with those changes that we can identify and anticipate in the future. Then if we look at the organizational context, what is really important to me to stress when I talk about futures in organizations is that it is not only a task to do in one level of the organization. It should happen at all levels. And to increase that capability, you should think about how different roles in your organizations can commit and participate in that making of those futures. If we start by the strategic level, that's maybe the most obvious, maybe having the word strategic in it, but that's about helping navigate the complexity on a higher level, planning those new ways of approaching the futures, stabilizing strategic planning by scanning the horizons and making plans and acting upon those signals that you can find. And then, of course, setting goals based on those long-term futures. That eventually will also help allocating resources to those parts of the organization that should be emphasized in those futures that you have studied. Then we have the team level or the operational level, so the one in the middle. Here, futures thinking can help understand the operating systems better. It can help those people understand those changes in the market. If you work in service business, understanding shifts in consumer behavior, thinking about implications of different kinds of developments or signals, and communicating that kind of opportunities and threats across the organization so they can be acted upon. And then finally, we have the personal level or the employee level. And here we talk about those people that may work in a role close to the customer interface, and they are really hands-on doing the work in the organization. And for these employees, I think it's important that futures thinking helps them remove uncertainty, building agency to work and build those futures with the organization, removing doubt and increasing trust and faith in the future of the organization by participating into these planning processes. So what are the benefits of cultivating a futures mindset in organizations. First of all, futures thinking companies are more resilient. Like I mentioned earlier, we know that there will be disruptions in the future as well. There will be setbacks, but we don't know when they will happen. So futures thinking will improve that long-term view in the organizations. It will also build the culture of learning, innovation, and the overall capability to react to those disruptions in the horizons. Then secondly, companies that think about futures stay relevant. We know and we have seen if organizations don't actively scan their environment or look for those budding opportunities or signals or warning signs, somebody else will be grabbing those opportunities or preparing for those risks. So that in the future can be a huge competitive advantage across industries. And then thirdly, the companies that engage in strategic foresight or cultivate this culture of futures thinking have a more robust understanding of those possibilities in the future. It's been studied actually that traditional models used in strategy planning, they cannot anymore respond to the volatile environment that we have. And compared to this foresight mindset, or even combining it with this design thinking, it gives you a more vibrant and more tangible depiction of those alternative futures that then decision makers can use to challenge their assumptions and make plans for the roadmap that they have to plan. So strategic foresight kind of it enriches the strategic planning by including qualitative, explorative methods and tools. And like I said earlier, bringing that imagination into play when thinking about how organizations should develop. So we can say that futures thinking is a capability to cultivate in the organization, and it will help the companies change their perspective towards the long-term thinking, and it will support those processes across the organization. And it is not enough to think about futures in only one part of the organization if the other parts are not aware or participating in creating these futures. It requires the entire culture, like I mentioned, where everyone is invited to envision and plan those futures. In the next slide, I'll have a really simplified picture of the process and of the knowledge flow that you can have when you engage in futures thinking and you want to make sure that those insights that you gather turn into action. And I hope that these steps will concretize how futures knowledge should be processed and flow. So on the left-hand side, when we start from the framing, it's really important to understand how far in the future you want to look. Because if you don't set the time frame, it will be really overwhelming to gather information and try to make plans based on it. So deciding how far into the future you want to plan. Then, of course, once you have your horizon, you will have to look for different kinds of signals, different kinds of forces of change in your environment. And I'll soon show you one tool that you can use that you make sure that you look at the whole system instead of your own comfort zone or your own box that you've used to looking. Then once you've done the scanning, you've gathered information, it's time to analyze. So looking at those findings and thinking about what they mean in your own context. And once you've asked those questions, my favorite part, imagining the alternative futures. And depending on your context or your needs or your perspectives, it can be, for example, these future states of your operating environment. You can depict potential customer needs or future customer profiles. So it can be anything that you need to do to make the future tangible for you. And once you've created these alternatives, it's time to plan and put yourself into those futures. Think about how your organization could operate there. How should you update your strategies? Is there some kind of offering that you could innovate to increase that resilience and relevance in those futures? And then finally, something that usually is hard to think once you've done an exercise or tried out different kinds of futures thinking tools, you should decide the first step. So what to do today to succeed in the future. And that's maybe sometimes the hardest part, depending on the length of your horizons, but also really important that you start building those paths towards those futures, or a future that you want to prepare for. So here I've simplified the process a bit more into 4 different steps. So thing that you can start doing in your weekly meetings, I think, even in your coffee table talks, if you have those at your office, just to spark curiosity and starting talking about the futures in a way that it will start going through the organization and sparking that interest towards thinking about longer term. So firstly, staying curious, investigating your system, investigating the changes in your context broadly. And I'll show you one framework that you can use for that soon. That will help you to look for insight and finding those blind spots that you may ignore if you don't scan your environment systematically. Then asking the what if questions. So concretizing the signals or trends or developments that you've identified and exploring their possible implications, and trying different kinds of methods to assess those and find these interdependencies that may spark an idea of how the future could look like. Then thirdly, thinking about how these developments could affect your business, how they could affect your offering, maybe how they could affect your customers. And thinking about what kind of futures we're talking about, who is participating in these futures, who is deciding, who is the decision maker in these futures. And creating and narrating these kinds of images that can be communicated across the organization and to your stakeholders that you want to involve to turn them into action. And then finally, evaluating the impact and responding. So finding those critical elements in those futures that you want to be able to prepare for and reacting to them and including them in different kinds of processes that you have in your organization, whether it is developing services or planning different strategies. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to start a heavy scenario project. There's a place for that as well, but I want to stress that to cultivate this futures thinking in your organization, I think it's easier to start small and invite everyone to participate. So when you do those bigger exercises, it's easier to get people into the right mindset. So like I promised, first I'll just quickly go through the steep analysis that some of you may already be familiar with, but that's something that it's easy to use when you do your futures research phase. So finding that different kinds of signals, gathering information, and making sure that you take all different perspectives into account. There are different kind of variations of this framework. The steep one is maybe the most familiar, but you can add different kind of perspectives, for example, culture, if you feel like that's relevant in your context. But I think what the Finnish Innovation Fund has done quite nicely, and this picture that I'm showing here on the right is something that they like to use when they talk about this steep framework. So like I said in the beginning, we cannot look at different kind of developments in silos anymore, and they put environment in the center of it all. So to illustrate that it is connected to all kinds of developments and trends of today. Then for the what if questions, one of the best tools that I found useful, especially in groups that are not too familiar with futures thinking, is the futures wheel. So in a simplified manner, it is a method similar to mind map, where you can look at or you can investigate a trend or a signal that you found, and looking at those different kinds of implications of it in a systematic manner. And it's really inspiring. It's been really inspiring for many clients when they have started looking at phenomenon, and then starting asking the what if questions again and again, and finding those different kinds of connections between phenomena and finding new kinds of ideas and development pathways, and kind of starting to get into that imaginative state of mind. And something that you can do with Futurist Will is combining it with the STEEP framework that I just showed you, just to make sure that you take into account different kinds of perspectives when you investigate these signals or trends. And then finally, a tool or a set of methods to imagine those futures. So when we talk about futures images, or we talk about scenarios, they are a bit different. And what is an easy way to start thinking about alternatives is creating futures images, these kind of narratives or illustrations of those alternative futures that you have imagined. When we talk about scenarios, they are more granular, there are more systematic ways to build those pathways to the future. So they have a different kinds of functions, but they are really like siblings with each other. Here I've gathered 3 examples of frameworks that you could use to think about different kinds of future states. So we have the matrix, which is quite easy way to start trying out creating alternative futures. Then we have futures archetypes, which is one of the classics you may have in the futures field. And then, of course, the futures table, which is a bit more complicated way of building alternative futures, but maybe one of the most detailed of these 3 examples. But by imagining these, like I've already said, you will help your organization to challenge those assumptions that have maybe been there for a while, opening up these new perspectives, maybe even provocations, and to get that ideation going for new opportunities for decision making. And then, of course, like we talked in the future, we live in a complex world where everything is connected. So this kind of futures images and scenario thinking, it helps you understand and combine those different developments and act upon them. Some things that I would like you to remember from this talk that we had today. First of all, futures thinking and strategic foresight, it's something that should take a holistic approach and a systemic view. So looking at all of those different perspectives to build a more comprehensive and more adaptable approach to planning and exploring a range of alternatives. So exploring multiple futures instead of committing to a single future that often is really close to our current state. Secondly, futures thinking or strategic foresight should not be thought of as a project or an exercise you do once in your organization. I think each organization should be able to identify those points or parts in the organization where futures knowledge should be integrated into decision-making processes, into development processes, where it would flow through the organization constantly, rather than being a one-off task or an exercise. And then finally, foresight or futures thinking should involve participation from all stakeholders across the organization to foster this collaborative and co-creational environment and building a collective intelligence from all parts of your organization or even your stakeholders outside of the organization. That helps you build the agency and find opportunities, discover blind spots that may have been hidden for a long time. So cultivating that knowledge across the organization is something that I cannot stress enough. But thank you for listening, and now I'll invite Lotta back on stage.
Thank you, Johanna, for this super inspiring talk. Hopefully we managed to pique your interest and you're all now wondering how you could take these learnings further in your organizations in practice. I thought I'd share a few points on how Hellon has helped our clients in the past. And here are some kind of 3 key things that we have done to support building these capabilities. Educating, innovating, and envisioning. Starting with educating, we've done hands-on training to share knowledge of futures thinking, which has encouraged employees to think broader, building agency around this organizational futures on all levels, which in turn then helps build resilience, as Johanna was talking about in the beginning of the webinar. And Johanna has personally trained people, for example, in the healthcare sector across the organization, from nurses and doctors to healthcare developers. Innovating, we use futures research to anticipate future customer needs, conceptualizing new value propositions and business models for the future, which then helps kind of push forward the industry. This means taking future foresight methodologies and tools into the design process to ensure that we're designing for a positive future. This is especially important in industries where the time to market for a new product or service is quite long. And Hellon has experience in this, for example, from the automotive industry, which has experienced disruption moving to EVs, electronic vehicles, and self-driving cars. And finally, envisioning. We've supported strategy processes with future foresight, defining desirable future states for organizations to help them steer the long-term strategy planning and market positioning. Great, that marks the end of our webinar and this momentum talk by Hellon. I really want to take the chance to thank all of you online, and thank you so much for joining. We hope that this has been an inspirational way to start your Wednesday, and you're now thinking future forward and have at least gotten a spark of courage to imagine what our futures might look like. We want to say thank you and have a lovely rest of the week, and we really hope to see you in future Momentum Talks by Hellon. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.